Sometimes I think it would be easier to build a damn rocket than put together some fantasy football rankings. I mean, every tight end sucks. There's like 50 wide receivers that can have a case made to be inside the top 30. Players are hurt and banged up all over the place, and now we have to worry about bye weeks. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone is doing well out there today. Hopefully you got your big boy pants on or your big girl pants on, because rankings are about to start looking a little bit weird because bye weeks are officially here. Now in today's show, I'm going to be going through quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends for week 5, and I'm going to do it the best way I know how. Let it flow style. I mean, it's going to be quick, it's going to be dirty, and you sickos are going to absolutely love it. Now, before I get this helmet put on and do some crazy work, I do gotta mention today's sponsor, Turtle Beach. And when you hear the name Turtle Beach, maybe you think about just headsets, and yes, they got some great ones, but that's not all they have. They have almost every gaming accessory possible. High quality at a price that does not break the bank. But they also have things from flight and racing simulators, controllers, keyboards, and mice. I mean, let's be honest, Turtle Beach is the ultimate gaming cheat code. Now, we want you to get that ultimate immersive gaming experience with Turtle Beach today. So for a limited time only, head over to turtlebeach.com and use the code word headliners at checkout. When you do that, you're gonna get 10% off your entire order. And I know people love discounts, so like I said, head over to turtlebeach.com, get yourself 10% off your entire order with code word headliners. But all right, now it's go time. It's time for me to put the helmet on and start rapid firing some rankings. So let's go ahead, put the helmet on. Got to strap up for safety here. Now, just a reminder, remember, rankings are meant to be a quick run through. If you're looking for more detailed information, that is in our start and sit videos, so be sure to check those out. But just like we've done all year long, we're going to dive into quarterbacks first, starting with my hits and misses from just last week. Now, when we look back at week 4, a few of my bigger hits at the quarterback position was Jaden Daniels, Sam Darnold, and Brock Purdy. Now, Jaden Daniels, it wasn't just a one-week fluke back in week 3. We ranked him super high for a reason, and he performed at a high level. Same thing can be said for Sam Darnold. He had himself another good week. Brock Purdy, I had a little bit lower in my rankings. I had some concerns. Basically, a Verge top 12 guy for me last week, and that's right where he finished. Now, some of my bigger misses. Kyler Murray, Jared Goff, and Justin Fields. Kyler Murray came out and absolutely crapped the bed last week. I'm talking like monster dino crapped the bed. Jared Goff looked like the greatest quarterback of all time. He didn't even want to incomplete a pass. That's how good he played. And then Justin Fields went out there and went absolutely crazy. Now, hopefully you're a member of Headliner Nation, because Mac has been dropping his late week lottery tickets each and every week. In the last 2 weeks, he's nailed Juwan Jennings and Justin Fields. So if you're not a member here, you may want to hit the little blue join button underneath the video so you can get access to those videos each and every week. But let's go ahead and dive into some week 5 rankings now for the quarterback position. And we'll just kick it off right here at Tier 1 with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jordan Love, and Brock Do 'em Dirty Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers. Now for Josh Allen, he's coming off a down week, now going up against Houston this week, who allows the 7th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, so Josh Allen is back on top. Then we got Lamar Jackson in a matchup going up against Cincinnati. He's had 50-plus rushing yards and a rushing touchdown now in back-to-back ball games. That's raising the floor and the ceiling for Lamar. Then we go down to Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commandos in a matchup going up against Cleveland. He has 7 touchdowns in 4 weeks and hasn't had a game yet this season where he's completed under 70% of his passes. Dude right now is the current rookie of the year. Then we got Jordan Love in a matchup going up against the Rams. The Rams allow the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and with Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed on the field, Jordan Love could put points up in bunches. Then we got Brock Purdy going up against Arizona, who just got absolutely torched by Jaden Daniels, and they allow the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. With George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk on the field, Brock Purdy's in line for a ceiling game. Which will then bring us down to Tier 2, where I got CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow, Geno Smith, Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and Justin Fields. Now, CJ Stroud has a matchup this week going up against Buffalo at home in Houston, and this one's going to be a little bit fun. It's the Stephon Diggs revenge game. Now, as much attention is going to be paid to Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins can't be stopped either. He's drawn a lot of defensive attention, but still should be fun. Then we got Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against Baltimore. A lot easier to throw on Baltimore than it is to run on Baltimore, and Joe Burrow has scored 17 plus fantasy points now in 3 straight ball games. Then we go to Geno Smith going up against the New York Giants. Not a lot of touchdowns, but man, oh man, is Geno racking up yardage right now. 325 plus yards now in 2 of his last 3 ball games, and he's coming off a game in which he just threw the ball 56 times in week 4. Which will then take us to Patrick Mahomes, who's lower than he usually is in a matchup going up against New Orleans. Dude has gone from a weekly matchup winner to just a safe floor play guy, a guy that's going to get you right around 15 points a week. That'll happen when you lose a ton of offensive weapons. They're going to have to utilize Travis Kelce more. But being that they don't have a whole lot else, Patrick Mahomes has fallen a few spots. After him, we got Baker Mayfield in the matchup going up against Atlanta. He scored 4 touchdowns in 2 games against Atlanta last season and really playing a lot better football this year. He's been a top 10 quarterback 3 of the 4 weeks this season. I got him at number 10. Which then takes us to Kyler Murray. He's going up against San Francisco, and this offense isn't near as bad as it looked just last week. But I do expect them to be losing all 4 quarters, which means they're going to have to throw the football a lot. Hopefully the majority of those targets are going the way of Marvin Harrison Jr., but I also expect Trey McBride to be back this week, which is a big boost to this offense. And then I got Justin Fields in a matchup going up against Dallas. We just saw a 300-yard passing game from Justin Fields. Plus, we know we have the rushing upside. Could Justin Fields really be on the verge of going on another one of those roles that we saw just a little bit ago in Chicago, where he absolutely carried fantasy football teams? Because that's kind of the sense I'm getting right now. But that will do it for Tier 2, so now we'll go down to Tier 3, where I got Dak Prescott, Caleb Williams, Andy Dalton, Aaron Rodgers, Sam Darnold, and Deshaun Watson. For Dak Prescott, he's going up against Pittsburgh, and it's a super tough matchup. They allow these 6th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and Brandon Cooks will not play in this ball game. However, the running game is so bad in Dallas, they have no choice but to continue to throw it all 4 quarters, so maybe we see a little bit more Jalen Tolbert this week. Then we got Caleb Williams in a matchup going up against Carolina. They allow over 18 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, but the running backs here in this matchup may take away some of the ceiling for Caleb Williams, so that's why he's not any higher. After him at number 15, though, is his opponent in that game. It's Andy Dalton, returning to Chicago, a team in which he played for just a couple years ago, and honestly, right now, Andy Dalton's playing great football for these Carolina Panthers. Now, does that mean they're going to win this week? I don't know if I want to go that far, but if they're playing from behind, that means Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle, is still slinging that rock down the field, so I got him at 15. 16, I have Aaron Rodgers going back to Minnesota to face the Vikings. The Vikings are a very solid defense, but this is still the best matchup that Aaron Rodgers has had in a couple weeks. Then we go down to his opponent in that game, Sam Darnold, going up against the Jets. Is this somewhat of a revenge game? A home game in Minnesota against the team who drafted him and gave up on him. It's not going to be easy, though. Super tough matchup. No team in the NFL allows less points to the quarterback position than the New York Jets. And then after him, we got Deshaun Watson going up against Washington. Washington allows the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks at 20.8 per game. But yes, this Browns offense is a little hit or miss at times. And not just that, look how good this Washington defense looked last week against Arizona. If that team shows up at home in Washington, it may not be a cakewalk for Deshaun Watson. Which takes us through quarterbacks, which means now we're going to go on to the running back position, and a few of my bigger hits and misses from last week. We'll start off with hits: Kyren Williams, Tony Pollard, and Brian Robinson Jr. Now, everyone every week wants me to have Kyren Williams inside the top 5, and I can't always put him that high. Put him a little bit lower, just a skosh, and really he finished right where we had him last week. Tony Pollard had himself a great game. Brian Robinson was utilized just as we expected last week as well. But really, when it comes to misses, this is where I kind of flubbed up last week. DeAndre Swift. Did anyone expect DeAndre Swift to put together that kind of game after what we saw the first 3 weeks of the season? I don't think so. Chuba Hubbard. I had him inside my top 24. I did not have him inside my top 12 like I should have. And then Chase Brown. Love Chase Brown. I've talked about Chase Brown since it wasn't the cool thing to do. Did I have him anywhere near high enough in my rankings? No, I did not. I missed big time on Chase Brown in week 3. But now we need to move forward to week 5. So here's what we got for week 5. In Tier 1, we got Jordan Mason, Derrick Henry, Kyren Williams, Kenneth Walker, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, and Alvin Kamara. Now for Jordan Mason, a great matchup going up against Arizona, who allows over 26 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, and the volume that Mason is getting is great. How about Derrick Henry, the king at number 2, in a matchup going up against Cincinnati? He has 383 total yards and 4 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks of the season, all while racking up 25 plus touches a game. Cincinnati also allows the 12th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Henry's at number 2. Number 3, this is where I got Kyren Williams in a great matchup going up against Green Bay. He's got back-to-back top 12 finishes, and now he gets a Green Bay defense who allows over 20 fantasy points per game to running backs. Then we move on to Kenneth Walker, going up against the Giants, came back healthy and really looked pissed off in week 4. Ran like a madman all over that Detroit defense. A better matchup this week going up against the Giants, so I got him at number 4. Number 5, it's Bijan Robinson going up against Tampa Bay. He's a little bit banged up right now, but this matchup going up against Tampa Bay is a good one, so we're going to risk it for the biscuit here with Bijan Robinson. Then we got Breece Hall, who's also banged up in a matchup going up against Minnesota. He did not look good at all last week, and now he gets a Minnesota defense who allows the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Now, it's not like Breece Hall is all of a sudden washed. I expect the Jets to figure it out, but I did have to drop him a few spots this week, and then Alvin Kamara to round out Tier 1 going up against Kansas City. He hasn't had less than 20 touches in a game all year, and now Taysom Hill is banged up and won't steal goal line touches, so that's a good thing for Alvin Kamara. Which will move us down to Tier 2. It's James Conner, Aaron Jones, James Cook, Josh Jacobs, Travis Etienne, Chuba Hubbard, Brian Robinson, and Joe Mixon. For James Conner in a matchup going up against San Francisco. He's had at least 100 yards rushing or a touchdown in 3 of the 4 games this season, which has resulted in 3 top 15 finishes. They need to utilize and they need to keep the ball away from San Francisco. How do you do that? You run successfully with James Conner. Then Aaron Jones going up against the Jets. He has back-to-back games with at least 24 touches, and the Jets are easier to run on than throw on. Then we move down to James Cook going up against Houston. He's coming off his worst game of the year, but really, he wasn't needed much in that blowout matchup. Then we go down to Josh Jacobs going up against the Rams. Green Bay fell behind big time, like 3 scores type big time in week 4, and they never really could rely on the run in Josh Jacobs. That's not something that's going to happen weekly. Then we got Travis Etienne going up against Indianapolis. Finally, a better matchup for Travis Etienne. The Colts allow over 18 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Then Chuba Hubbard at number 13 going up against Chicago. Back-to-back games with 100-plus yards and a touchdown. He is really benefiting from Andy Dalton being under center. And I say that because opposing defenses now all of a sudden have to worry about the passing game in Carolina, which wasn't the case when Bryce Young was the quarterback. Then we have Brian Robinson Jr. going up against Cleveland. Now he's dealing with a knee injury, a minor knee injury, and Cleveland is a little bit tougher to run on, but really there's a lot of running backs after him that have a little bit more risk. Like Joe Mixon, does he return this week going up against Buffalo? He could be back from that ankle injury, and it would be a great time because Buffalo allows the most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs in fantasy football. Then we move down to Tier 3. It's Devon Achane, Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt, Zach Moss, and DeAndre Swift. Now, yes, it absolutely sucks to have Devon Achane all the way down here in Tier 3 in a tough matchup going up against New England. But this Miami offense, without a capable quarterback, is absolute dog water. After him, we got Ramondre Stevenson in a matchup going up against Miami, and he just needs to hold on to the damn ball so he doesn't get benched. A great matchup for him to do it, though, because Miami allows the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Then we got Najee Harris going up against Dallas. No Jaylen Warren once again, and now Justin Fields is starting to move the ball down the field a little bit more. The problem is he's losing goal line carries to Justin Fields, and that's why he's still a little bit lower. After him, we got Jerome Ford in a matchup going up against Washington. He has now had 7 targets in 2 games this year, which is really helping his floor out weekly. Still a low-end running back 2 each and every week. Then we have Kareem Hunt going up against New Orleans. 16 touches last week in an offense that's starved for playmakers in Kansas City. He's a solid running back 2. Zach Moss, he's going up against Baltimore this week. How much did the Chase Brown explosion last week Take away from Zach Moss now, because this is a very difficult matchup going up against Baltimore. I could see the split in touches in this backfield be a lot closer than it has been to start the season. And then to round out Tier 3, this is where we have DeAndre Swift, a great matchup going up against Carolina. He crushed it on people's benches last week. Now he gets a great matchup going up against Carolina, who allows the second most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. If that's the case, why isn't he higher? Because he's more than likely going to be splitting touches with Roschon Johnson, who we'll talk about here in just a minute. But until then, we're going to go down to Tier 4, where I have Devin Singletary, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Braylon Allen, Justice Hill, Trey Sermon, and Tyler Algier. Really, for the most part, this tier is made up of a bunch of handcuffs that have current workloads. Now, obviously, Devin Singletary isn't a handcuff, but he's got a matchup going up against Seattle here this week. And with so much volume going the way of Malik Neighbors, it's really hard to get Devin Singletary going. Then we have Chase Brown, who absolutely exploded, and if he gets more of an opportunity, expect more of those explosions. Then we got Bucky Irving in Tampa Bay. He's going up against the Atlanta Falcons, splitting backfield touches there with Rachaad White. Same thing for Braylon Allen in a matchup going up against Minnesota. With Breece Hall not 100% healthy, maybe we see a little bit more Braylon Allen this week. How about Justice Hill? This dude looked like he was playing at a completely different speed during last week's game. Now he's going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. You have to think he earned some more touches. Then Trey Sermon going up against Jacksonville. Do we have Jonathan Taylor or not? At the time of this recording, he hasn't been officially ruled out. Some people are out there saying he could miss a couple weeks. Some people are saying he's absolutely fine. Now, obviously, if Jonathan Taylor plays, he's probably somewhere inside of Tier 2. If he doesn't, I don't really trust Trey Sermon to put him super high in the rankings. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be in that offense yet. And it's not like Trey Sermon is some super efficient running back. He needs huge volume to put up any type of numbers. So really, until we know more, I got him right here at 28. And then Tyler Algier just behind him. And right now, slightly climbing. Not so much due to the matchup in Tampa Bay, but Bijan Robinson is not 100% either. And we saw more Tyler Algier last week than a lot of people expected. Don't be surprised if he gets more touches this week to keep Bijan Robinson healthy. Which will then take us down to Tier 5, where we got Rachaad White, Rico Dowdle, Javonte Williams, Antonio Gibson, Roschon Johnson, Zach Charbonnet, and Tank Bigsby. Now, for Rachaad White, he's got the matchup going up against Atlanta, but with the inefficiencies in his game, if he's not getting 18-plus touches a week, he's not putting up decent fantasy numbers, and with Bucky Irving, he's not getting that much volume. Then Rico Dowdle of the Dallas Cowboys going up against Pittsburgh, a super difficult matchup and a run game that just can't get going in Dallas. Then Javonte Williams, coming off a decent game for Javonte Williams. It's not a bad matchup going up against Las Vegas either. But really, for the most part, he's been highly inefficient. Now, could he find the end zone this week? Absolutely, but we could say that same thing about almost all these running backs in Tier 4 or 5. After him, we got Antonio Gibson going up against Miami. A great matchup. He's on the verge of getting more touches in this offense because Ramondre Stevenson keeps fumbling the football, and when he does touch the football, he doesn't look half bad. Don't forget, he's a former top 12 overall fantasy running back before. The guy has the potential for huge production. Then we got Roschon Johnson going up against Carolina, a great matchup, splitting that backfield work with DeAndre Swift. Then Zach Charbonnet going up against the Giants, really not as involved with a healthy Kenneth Walker, but not a bad matchup for him. And then Tank Bigsby going up against the Colts. The matchup is so great that even if Tank only gets right around 10 touches, I do think in a week in which we have some buys that he could be a low-end flex play for super deep leagues. Which will bring us through running backs. So now we go on to the wide receiver position. Some of my bigger hits and misses from last week, starting with the hits: Mike Evans, Malik Neighbors, and Terry McLaurin. A lot of people were worried about Mike Evans having a couple down games. We stuck with it. He had himself a great game. How about Malik Neighbors? I mean, I really feel like Kyren Williams truthers are also Malik Neighbors truthers, because I can never rank the guy high enough. They're never happy with where I have him. I was told I was crazy last week for having him right there as a Verge top 12 wide receiver. He finished as like the wide receiver 11, right where he was ranked. And then Terry McLaurin, it wasn't a 1 week fluke in week 3. They're going to start including him more and more as Jaden Daniels gets comfortable. As for the misses, Jordan Addison, Brian Thomas Jr., and Josh Downs. I don't know if anyone really expected Jordan Addison to come back the way he did, but he looked great. Brian Thomas Jr., he's going to be the deep threat in this offense. However, if Evan Ingram does return, that's not going to help Brian Thomas Jr. in any way. And then Josh Downs. Do I think Josh Downs has a great day if Anthony Richardson stays under center? Probably not. But with Joe Flacco under center, Josh Downs may be a weekly must-start type of guy. But enough of week 4, now we're moving on to week 5. And right here in tier 1 for week 5, we got CeeDee Lamb, Nico Collins, Marvin Harrison Jr., Deebo Samuel, Malik Neighbors, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson. Now at the top, we got CeeDee Lamb in a matchup going up against Pittsburgh. No Brandon Cooks in this game, which means even more targets going the way of CeeDee Lamb. At 2, I got Nico Collins. 10 plus targets in 3 of his 4 games played, 100 plus yards in 3 of his 4 games played. The dude is an absolute beast and a potential shootout against the Buffalo Bills. Then I got Marvin Harrison Jr. Arizona doesn't have a choice. They're going to have to use this guy more if they want to keep any game this season even remotely close. Then we go down to his opponent in that game, Deebo Samuel. San Francisco hasn't scored less than 35 points in a game against Arizona since 2021. Deebo is the Arizona killer. Then we have Malik Neighbors going up against Seattle. Now he's currently questionable. He's in concussion protocol, but if he plays, we cannot ignore the volume or the matchup. I got him right here at 5. Then Jamar Chase going up against Baltimore. He's got touchdowns now in back-to-back games, and they won't be able to run the ball very well against Baltimore. They're gonna have to throw it downfield. Then we have Justin Jefferson going up against the Jets. Now, more than likely, he's gonna get covered in that sauce, but with the way that he and Sam Darnold are playing together, they cannot be counted out any given week. You're gonna start him if you got him, regardless of where I rank him. Which then takes us down to tier 2, where I got DK Metcalf, Jaden Reed, Chris Godwin, DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Chris Olave, and Drake London. For DK Metcalf, he's going up against the Giants, and he's coming off 3 straight 100-yard games. No one can stop DK right now. Then Jaden Reed going up against the Rams. Him and Jordan Love can beat you so many different ways. Plus, he has that rushing upside as well. I got Jaden Reed all the way up at 9. At 10, it's Chris Godwin going up against Atlanta. Another great matchup against a below-average slot corner. Yes, please. Then DJ Moore going up against Carolina. The Carolina revenge game for DJ Moore. Now, his target share hasn't been bad, but in a revenge game, maybe he gets an added red zone target, which Jakey likey. Then we go down to Mike Evans here at number 12 going up against Atlanta. Tampa Bay is 2-0 this season when Mike Evans catches at least 5 passes a game. That's what they're going for here this week. Then Chris Olave going up against the Chiefs. Minimal weapons on this team that they can really push the ball down the field to, but Chris Olave, we need to pay attention to because he is not 100% healthy either. Then Drake London going up against Tampa Bay, finally getting a bigger target share. Has now had 9+ targets in back-to-back weeks, so he's at 14. Then we go down to Garrett Wilson going up against Minnesota. This is the best matchup he's had in weeks, and really, it's not that easy. He's still getting a lot of targets, he just needs more catchable targets. Then we go down to Stephon Diggs going up against Buffalo, the Buffalo revenge game, and 9+ targets in this offense in back-to-back games gives Stephon Diggs a safer floor. Then at 17, we go Deontay Johnson going up against the Bears. He's been an absolute target monster, 27 targets in 2 games with Andy Dalton. Then we move down to George Pickens going up against Dallas. And Justin Fields is finally starting to push the ball down the field more to George Pickens. 8+ targets is the magic number. Every game for the last 2 years that George Pickens has seen at least 8 targets, he's put up at least 100 yards receiving. Then we go down to Brandon Ayuk going up against Arizona. What a better time to get back on track than a home game against the Arizona Cardinals. How about Amari Cooper up next going up against Washington? No team allows more fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers than the Washington Commanders. If Jerry Jeudy can stay out of his way, Amari Cooper has the chance to have a big day. Then we go down to Terry McLaurin going up against Cleveland. The connection between him and Jaden Daniels has now been building in back-to-back weeks, and it's going to be really hard to run on Cleveland. They're going to have to throw the football. How about Zay Flowers next going up against Cincinnati? All this is going to come down to is the dominance of King Henry. We've seen it now in back-to-back weeks. If they're dominating on the ground, Zay Flowers isn't needed. If they struggle on the ground, Zay Flowers becomes an easy top 15 to 20 wide receiver weekly. But now we move down to tier 4, where it's Brian Thomas Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyreek Hill, Xavier Worthy, Khalil Shakir, T. Higgins, and Christian Kirk. Now, Brian Thomas Jr. has a matchup going up against Indianapolis, and Jacksonville can't stop anyone, which means Brian Thomas Jr. and Christian Kirk are benefiting because they're getting a lot of balls down the field weekly. Now, there is a chance that Evan Ingram returns, and if that's the case, we could see a decrease in target share, so pay attention to that. Then we move down to Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's really overtaken that wide receiver 2 role in this offense and taken away the target share from Tyler Lockett. How about Tyreek Hill all the way down here in tier 4? But yes, that's how bad this Miami offense is. With Skylar Thompson, with Tyler Huntley, it doesn't matter. Then we go down to Xavier Worthy. And really, I would love to put him up inside tier 3. And as the week progresses, maybe as we get some more news about some of these players, players ahead of him, he could climb into tier 3. But as of right now, he is still somewhat of a one-trick pony. If he doesn't get the deep ball, he doesn't put up fantasy points. That's a huge risk, more of a flex play option. After him, we got Khalil Shakir in a matchup going up against Houston, a matchup in which they're going to have to throw the ball, and Khalil Shakir has been their #1 wide receiver this season. Then T. Higgins going up against Baltimore. The big plays thus far have been going the way of Jamar Chase, and they're still involving their tight ends Mike Gesicki and Eric All, so T. Higgins is down here at 28, and then Christian Kirk going up against Indianapolis. And just like I mentioned with Brian Thomas Jr., we're really paying attention to the availability of Evan Ingram. If he returns, that is going to hurt the wide receivers in Jacksonville, which then only leaves us tier 5. It's Wan'Dale Robinson, Dontavian Wicks, Michael Pittman, Rashid Shaheed, Xavier Leggett, Darnell Mooney, and Jordan Addison. For Wan'Dale Robinson, the dude is an absolute target monster. The problem is, he doesn't get the ball very deep down the field. He basically gets a bunch of wide receiver screen passes, and the only yardage he can gain is whatever he can get after the catch. Now, if you're in a full PPR league, he would be higher in these rankings. Then we have Dontavian Wicks. And with Christian Watson banged up, Wicks is going to be a weekly option, especially in a matchup going up against the Los Angeles Rams. Now, after him is where I have Michael Pittman Jr., but we have no idea who's going to play quarterback for the Colts at the time of this recording. If it's Anthony Richardson, Pittman may drop even lower. If it's Joe Flacco, he may climb all the way up inside tier 3, so pay attention to that quarterback situation. Then we have Rashid Shaheed going up against Kansas City. They're going to need to put some points on the board early this week. And with Chris Olave potentially not 100%, we could see more Rashid Shaheed. Then we have Xavier Leggett going up against the Chicago Bears. We saw that target share immediately due to the injury of Adam Thielen. We're going to see it again this week. Then Darnell Mooney, the #2 option in the Atlanta offense. In a matchup this week going up against Tampa Bay, I easily expect him to see 8+ targets, and then Jordan Addison going up against the Jets. If Sauce Gardner can even come remotely close to keeping Justin Jefferson in line, that means Jordan Addison could feast this week just due to lesser defensive attention. And I can't even begin to tell you how much it sucks to do wide receiver rankings, because there's still like another 15 wide receivers that you could make a case for being up inside the top 30. Just because we see some of these guys as low as they are does not mean that I don't like them. It just means that I can't fit 40 names into 25 spots. I absolutely love the depth of the wide receiver position here in 2024, but now we're going to transition into tight ends and talk about some of my bigger hits and misses. Who are we kidding? Everyone at this position sucks. It doesn't matter who it is. No one is consistently producing at the tight end position. All we can do for the rest of the season is just hope and pray to the fantasy gods that somebody in the tight end position wants to play football at a decent level the remainder of the year. Until then, I'm just looking for a guy with a pulse, and we're going to dive right into the Week 5 rankings. And in Tier 1, that's where I got George Kittle, Trey McBride, Travis Kelce, Brock Bowers, and Dalton Kincaid. For George Kittle, it's a great matchup going up against Arizona because they can't stop anyone, anywhere. But right after him is his opponent in that game, Trey McBride. Now, he should be coming out of the concussion protocol, and this offense desperately missed him last week. They're going to be throwing because they're going to be losing, so Trey McBride should have a decent ceiling here, hopefully this week. After him, it's Travis Kelce, the highest he's been ranked probably since week 1. Why? Kansas City doesn't really have a whole lot of other guys to throw the ball to. They're going to have to utilize Travis Kelce more in a matchup going up against New Orleans. Then Brock Bowers going up against Denver. It totally makes sense that Brock Bowers saw less targets with no Devontae Adams in week 4. No, I'm absolutely joking. It makes no sense. Now Patrick Surtain is going to be locking down Jacoby Myers because Devontae Adams isn't playing, so we should see more Brock Bowers in week 5. Which then takes us to number 5, and it's Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills going up against Houston. And honestly, I could see this game turning into a potential shootout. Two teams with solid defenses, but when they get together, all bets are off, and it's all about scoring points. For Tier 2, it's Jake Ferguson, Evan Ingram, David Njoku, Cole Kmet, and Tucker Kraft. For Jake Ferguson, there's no Brandon Cooks. They're going to have to use Fergie more, but it's a tough matchup going up against Pittsburgh. Then we have Evan Ingram in a great matchup going up against Indianapolis. The only question here is, does he actually return from the hamstring injury he's had here the last couple weeks? If he plays and he's active, it's a great matchup. Same thing for the guy after him as well, David Njoku, going up against the Washington Commanders. Does he return from an ankle injury here this week? Because if he does, it's a great matchup and a great start as well. Now after them, I got Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears in a great matchup going up against Carolina. Really the only reason he's here is the matchup and the chance he has at scoring a touchdown. After that, it's Tucker Kraft of the Green Bay Packers going up against the Rams. I would love to put him higher, but I do not expect the Green Bay Packers to fall behind by 3 scores each and every week and have to throw the ball nonstop. but he is still a decent option in that offense. Which then only leaves us tier 3. It's Zach Ertz, Patty F, Pat Fryermuth, Cade Otton, Kyle Pitts, and Juwan Johnson. Now for Zach Ertz, he's got a difficult matchup going up against Cleveland, and really he wasn't needed much in Arizona last week because they were blowing the doors off the Cardinals. Then we got Pat Fryermuth in a matchup going up against Dallas. He has 4 catches in every game this year. Now no, not a ton of yardage, but still a safe, reliable, low-end tight end 1. Then Cade Otton of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against Atlanta. He has back-to-back weeks now with at least 6 catches. Hey, I think anyone would take 6 catches from their tight end right now. And then we got Kyle Pitts. Speaking of catches, we shouldn't be speaking about Kyle Pitts because he had nothing last week because Darnell Mooney has basically taken his target share. Which then leads us to our last tight end on the list. It's Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints in a matchup going up against Kansas City. Taysom Hill is banged up. Chris Olave is banged up. Foster Moreau was not involved in the passing game last week, which means we could see more targets going the way of Juwan Johnson in week 5. Which means we've now made it through all of our week 5 rankings, and just in time, because my vision is starting to get a little bit blurred. Now, hopefully the bye weeks aren't affecting your team too much. Hopefully you've been staying on top of the waiver wire and making sure you have a great option for this week. Now, if you enjoyed today's show, do me a favor and hit the like button now and consider subscribing if you haven't already. We love to provide fantasy football information in a fun, lighthearted, somewhat entertaining type of way. There is so much toxicity out there on the internet right now. Hopefully you found yourself a home here in Headliner Nation. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day. I'm going to go take this helmet off and try to regain function in my left eye. So hopefully you have a great rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.
Analytics, off the chain, all the channels, not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.